Hey there, my name is Danielle, and today we're going to be practicing a prenatal yoga class. I am currently 37 weeks pregnant myself in my third trimester, but I've been teaching Iyengar yoga since 2011. And I recognized that there was a lot of things I knew not to do once I stepped into pregnancy, but I really was curious about what I could do. And the truth is, even though we're pregnant, there's a lot of things that we're very, very capable of. It's just about accommodating those changes in the body that come with pregnancy. And so, really, that's what you're going to see this prenatal class tailored to. There's various things such as indigestion, heartburn, fatigue that we might be experiencing. And then there's also a lot of physical changes happening, specifically in the pelvis. You have a lot of the tendons and ligaments relaxing to make the pelvis more spacious. And you have your uterus growing, which also is a new muscle that is now stretching and expanding for a couple of months, something that it's never done. And there's all kinds of tendons and ligaments around that muscle as well that we want to care for and be mindful for. So today we're going to be exploring a sequence that would probably be pretty fit for a morning experience. Maybe you're just getting up, feeling a little stiff or a little groggy, or this is something that you might practice if you're feeling fatigued and need something that's a little bit more grounding and nurturing. We're also going to explore some fundamental concepts about practicing yoga while pregnant. And I hope that you explore taking that practice into other poses or into other classes that you might take. So today's class, we're going to use 2 blankets, 1 strap, and a bolster. You're also going to need some wall space. Now, if you feel like you don't have these props, there are different things you can use to substitute in. And if you have any questions about what to use or how to use other props to accommodate these same poses, you can reach out to me either in the comments or shoot me a message directly and talk a little bit more with me about it. Happy to explore that with you if you're having any trouble figuring it out. So again, today we're going to use 2 blankets, a strap, and a bolster. To get started, we're going to practice a pose called Viparita Karani, which in Sanskrit means inverted lake. We'll use a bolster and a blanket for that, but once we start to shift out of that pose, we're going to practice Ananda Balasana, which means blissful child pose. For that one, we're going to use a strap. So you're going to want these 3 props plus the wall near you. Now I want to demonstrate just so you can kind of see some of the transitioning points of like getting in, moving to the second pose, and how to come out, and then we'll practice together. That way you're not trying to continuously look at the screen as we go through it, and you can really be in the pose once we're there. So to get into inverted lake pose, I have my bolster up against the wall, and I have a blanket nearby, which I'm gonna move underneath my head once I come and lay back down on the floor. My strap is within an arm's reach. We're gonna get to using that in the second pose. To come into inverted lake pose, I'm actually gonna start shifting myself quite close to the wall here. So you can see that my hips are against the wall, my feet are at the wall, and I have an arm underneath me to support me here. And I'm going to shift myself onto the bolster. Now, once I'm here, I'm switching which arm is supporting me. So now I have both hands supporting me. I'm going to slide this lower arm underneath. And as I roll onto my back, I can take my legs up the wall. Now, I'm not too worried about where your hips are in relationship to the wall, but what we do want is to lift the hips up so we can get that bolster supporting our pelvis, and you'll feel the whole low back supported here. It also starts to give a little bit of a lift to the chest. So if you notice the bolster is too close to the wall, you'll probably feel the chest dip down towards the floor as opposed to being quite rounded and lifted up here. The feet are hip width apart, and we're giving a little bit of a turn of the toes in while the feet are flexed. And you can bring your blanket, sit underneath the head, and we'll be here resting for a few moments. Now to transition into that blissful child pose, all I'm going to do is press my feet up into the wall I'm going to shift this bolster out from underneath me for a moment. I can still use this position here to bring some intelligence to what we call the pit of the thigh. And that's right where your thigh bone runs into your pelvis here. So we'll be taking a few breaths there and grabbing our strap. As you loop the strap around your outer feet, now we're taking our heels above our knees, feet almost are as if they're flat on the ceiling here. I want to keep that deep bend in my hip crease, the pit of my thigh, as I start to give a little bit of resistance and pull my feet, pull my knees down towards the ground. We'll take a few breaths here, straighten the legs, take the legs back up, and then to come out, we'll bend the knees, roll off to the side, and press ourselves up. And we'll move into a Chaturanga, which is a cat-cow. In Sanskrit, they'll call it Chaturanga, which is that tabletop position. Okay, so now you know where we're headed. Let's go ahead and practice together. So we have that strap within an arm's reach, blankets ready for us, bolster against the wall. Shifting our hips and feet up against the wall here, supporting myself with both of my hands in front of me while I face the ground. Now I'm going to shift my hips up onto the bolster here. I'm going to give you some left and right insight, but this hand that's closer towards the outside of the room or the outside of our body and our legs is going to hold us. In this case, that's my left hand. That's going to hold me as I slide my right arm underneath it, placing my shoulders on the floor. And as I roll onto my back, can take my legs up the wall. From here, I'm going to press my feet into the wall, move the bolster so it's supporting my pelvis and essentially my mid-spine to create that nice rounding of the chest while my hips are elevated. The feet are hip width apart. You can give a little flex to the feet, pulling the toes towards your shin as you turn the toes in towards each other. Feel free to grab that blanket, place it underneath your head. Now this is just a lovely pose to relax and absorb. And I want to give you some time to really experience it. I also want to explain a couple of features about this pose that are really helpful to know so that you can integrate them in other practices that you might experience. So this turn of the toes in with the feet flexed actually helps create an internal rotation in your thigh bone. That internal rotation in the thigh is going to help create a little bit more space and spreading across the back of your pelvis, which is going to be quite nice. Is a feeling, but it's also very helpful for the pelvis to continue spreading as those tendons and ligaments soften. Another attribute about this pose that's really nice is you have the legs above the hips and the hips above the heart. When we're pregnant, we have 50% more blood volume pumping through us, which means there's just a little bit more effort that the heart has to put in to circulate all of that blood. Towards the third trimester, many women voice that they feel some swelling in the feet, swelling in the legs. You might even experience more leg cramps. So this pose helps invert that, using gravity to gently pull all that blood from the feet back down to the abdomen, and from the abdomen down to the heart. Just helping the heart do its job a little bit easier while also eliminating some swelling in the feet and the ankles. Because of all that increase in blood volume and effort to circulate from the legs back up to the heart, many women voice that they get varicose veins as well, and this is something that can help remedy that. As you gently lengthen your inhale and exhale, soften any tension in the face, such as the eyes, lips, or jaw. Honestly, we could stay here for quite a while, couldn't we? But we're going to go ahead and progress forward. And I'd encourage you to integrate this into your daily practice if this is something that really resonated with you. Now to move into that blissful child pose, that Ananda Balasana, we're going to bend our knees. And as you press into the wall, lift your hips up and slide the bolster out from underneath you. As you lower your hips down to the floor, your spine will be flat on the floor here, but we still have our feet against the wall, and our feet are going to be quite wide, much wider than the hips. Now we want our knees to be wider than the side waists. As you gently press your feet into the wall, see if you can sharpen your tailbone down towards the floor. So what you'll feel is that really the lower spine and the sacrum and the back of your pelvis should feel pretty flat on the floor here. If you sharpen that tailbone too much to the floor, you'll feel your low back lifting away from the floor. And in the opposite sense, if your hips are quite tight here in this position, you might even feel your tailbone rounding up to the ceiling. So see if you can deepen those pits of the thighs that I've mentioned before, just to get the back of the pelvis and the lower spine nice and flat. As you take a nice deep inhale, nice deep exhale, think about lengthening your spine all the way through to the crown of your head from that sharpness of your tailbone, stretching towards the wall and stretching towards the floor. So this is the position of the spine and the hips that we're wanting to support here through pregnancy in general, but definitely as we progress a little bit more into this next pose. What you might notice here in this position as well is this is very much like malasana or garland pose. Many call it a yogi squat, but now we have the support of the floor underneath us, and there's a little bit less narrowing that's happening in the pelvis because our hips don't have to support our body weight. We can still get that nice depth in the hips here, which is great for birthing and actual labor posture, but we don't have the weight, we don't have the narrowing of the pelvis happening here. So we want to keep that in mind as we grab our strap, because we're going to place our strap around the outer edges of the feet. Again, the feet are quite wide here because we want the knees to come outside of the torso. But now once the strap is around the outer foot or outer feet, my feet are in a different position. My feet are flat to the ceiling over the knees, meaning that your shins are going to be perpendicular to the floor. You're only going to pull your knees towards the floor as much as you can keep your spine nice and straight. Notice that moment when the tailbone starts to lift up towards the ceiling or the low back really starts to press down into the floor. Instead, we want to focus on deepening that pit of the thigh so that we can lengthen the spine along the floor. As your tailbone actually sharpens towards the floor and towards the wall, lift your chest up towards the chin and soften the neck, soften the jaw. And then we'll go ahead and remove the strap here, set it off to the side, and we'll come up. You can bend the knees towards the chest, and as you roll to your side, take your time, pressing yourself up. We're going to move to a tabletop position. This is called Chaturangāsana in Sanskrit, and many call it cat-cow. We are going to add some movement to this position here. So I want to just demonstrate for you really briefly, and then we'll practice together because there's some specific things that we want to practice and break down in this particular cat-cow. So for today, right now, this first practice, I'm going to keep my head in a neutral position, looking straight at the floor. And really, we're going to start just working with the shoulders. And so what I'm doing here is in the cat position, I'm rounding my shoulders towards the floor and lifting my upper back towards the ceiling. As I move into that cow position, now I'm squeezing the shoulder blades behind me, dropping the chest, dropping the belly towards the floor. So once we focus on the shoulders, then we'll integrate the hips. So as I round my upper back towards the ceiling, I'm going to tuck my tailbone and lift my pubic bone towards my belly and really round that back. Then in the cow position, squeezing the shoulder blades together. Now I'm sharpening my tailbone up towards the ceiling here. And so just using those points of reference to explore this cat-cow. The last few breath cycles will integrate the head and the breath. And so exhaling, dropping the head, rounding the back, inhaling, squeezing the shoulder blades, lifting the tailbone up. And do as much as your body is comfortable with. We'll explore all of that. So now let's go ahead and do together. Coming from that tabletop position, you can see I'm actually kneeling on a blanket just because my knees are a little bit more sensitive. You might use a folded mat, or again, a blanket works great. In that tabletop position with the knees under the hips, wrists under the shoulders, you can spread your fingers wide, keeping the head in a neutral position. So just gazing between your hands. We'll keep the head here in line with the spine. We're going to practice working with the shoulders. So go ahead and round the upper back towards the ceiling. Notice how the shoulders roll forward towards the collarbones. And then squeeze the shoulder blades together towards the spine. Notice how the chest drops to the floor, abdomen and belly drop to the floor. And do this 3 more times. Rounding the upper back, shoulder blades move, or shoulders move towards the collarbones, and then squeezing the shoulder blades together towards the spine. Feeling how the collarbones stretch from the very center of the chest all the way across to the front of the shoulder. You can harmonize this effort with your breath, but right now we're really tuning in to what's happening in the shoulder joints and how that relates to the chest and the spine. So rounding the upper back, shoulders drop forward towards the collarbones, and squeezing the shoulder blades in towards the spine, feeling that spreading from the center of the chest to the front of the shoulder. Now we're going to integrate the hips here. Still the gaze is just between the hands. As you round your upper back towards the ceiling, now think about tucking your tailbone to the floor and really lifting that pubic bone up towards your chest. And then squeezing the shoulder blades in towards your spine. Now the belly drops to the floor and you'll feel how you can lift your tailbone and your hips up towards the ceiling here. Go ahead and do 3 more times with your own breath. Getting that nice extension in the back of the body as the back rounds, tailbone tucks. And then as you squeeze the shoulder blades, lift the tailbone up, a full contraction around the spine. Really getting that sensation of a back bend. Exhaling, rounding the back, tucking the tailbone. Inhaling, squeezing the shoulder blades so that the chest becomes broad from the center of the chest to the outer or to the fronts of the shoulders. Those collarbones will stretch. And once you've done that, you can go ahead and do 3 more times, adding your head. Head drops when the back rounds. Exhaling as you inhale, you can take the gaze forward, keeping those shoulders rolling away from the ears as you do that. Just getting some nice extension and flexion in the spine here. Once you come to that neutral tabletop position, Now we're going to do some lateral stretches of the spine, meaning we're going to try and stretch the sides of the spine. So here we're kind of wiggling our hips side to side, pulling that shoulder towards the hip as our hip shifts out. So once your hip goes out to the left, that left shoulder squeezes in. You'll feel the right side of your body is long, while the left side might be a little bit more contracted. You can add your head to this and integrate with your breath. Just breathing in and out through the nose, keeping the heart rate a little bit lower, breathing a little bit deeper. And 2 more times. Beautiful. And then we can sit back on the heels and we'll move on to our next pose. All right, so I've changed the camera position a little bit so you can see these poses better. We're gonna use our bolster and the wall again. You're welcome to set your mat up against the wall as well, although it's not totally necessary. So I'm gonna shift myself onto my bolster, and I'm all the way up against the wall. Now here we can take the legs wide, toes are pointing out, and I'm kind of in that malasana position that we were in when we were laying on the floor. The pose is called Blissful Child pose, so Ananda Balasana in Sanskrit. And we were getting in touch with that pit of the thigh, which is right where that thigh bone meets the pelvis here. And so as you sit with the feet wide, knees wide, and the support of the wall, this is a great position for laboring and a great birthing position. You definitely want some support. I know that there's a lot of pregnancy videos that practice this without support, but because the hips have to hold up our body weight, it can kind of create a little bit of narrowing in the pelvis. And while we're pregnant, that's not necessarily the best position, especially because baby's head actually starts to drop down into the pelvis as we progress in pregnancy. So we really want to try and create some spaciousness in there more than anything. You can even add an extra bolster underneath you, which is very, very common, especially in Iyengar yoga, and highly, highly recommended. Then you can fully focus on getting this depth in the hips here and keeping the spine nice and long. What you might notice while you're sitting here even is that the pelvis wants to almost tuck underneath you. This will happen if the hips are tight, and that's where it's really beneficial to sit up a little bit higher. You can really get that straightness in the spine and having the pelvis stacked nicely underneath the spine's vertebrae. So just trailed off a little bit, but from this position, we're getting that depth in the pits of the thighs. And we're gonna drive our heels into the floor and lifting the toes, and I'm scrubbing my heels away from me as I come into a wide angle extended pose called Upavista Konasana. As I press my heels down into the floor, you can see my feet are still quite active here. I'm actually squeezing the quadricep tight to the bone to press the thigh down as I lift my chest and my spine up towards the ceiling, going through the crown of my head. Keeping this activity is going to help support the hips, help support the pelvis, rather than if we were to just kind of be more passive in this pose. That work of the legs actually helps bring a little bit more intelligence and muscular support into the hip socket, which is very, very beneficial for the pelvis during this time. It also helps us lengthen the inner groin and open the pelvis up. So as soon as we become passive in the legs, we're not getting that same extension and that same support to open and spread the pelvis wide. Now we're going to take our arms up and overhead, just reaching the fingertips up towards the ceiling. Here, this pose is called Urdhva Hastasana, upward hands. Just like in that Chaturangasana, just like in that cat-cow pose, notice what the shoulders are doing here. All right, we can round the shoulders forward and feeling that compression on the collarbones, or you can squeeze the shoulder blades together, pull the shoulders away from the ears, and you'll feel much more broadness in the chest here. As your heels and your thighs press down to the floor, think about that pit of the thigh driving down to the floor as you lift your side waists up towards the ceiling. Lift the crown of the head up towards the ceiling, making the spine nice and long here. Taking a smooth, deep, steady inhale, deep, steady exhale. This pose gives us some broadness in the pelvis. Starts to open the pelvis up, while also giving us a chest opener, boosting our mood, giving a little boost to our energy. And if you're feeling fatigued, this is a great one since we have the support of the wall as well. It can feel a little bit more nourishing than if we were holding this on our own in the center of the room. And we'll bring our hands down. And we're going to shift into Baddha Konasana, bound angle pose. I'm going to hook underneath my thigh right near my knee, and I'm actually going to support my leg. So rather than my leg doing all the work, which would start to draw some activity from the abdomen, I'm going to really help pull that foot in back to this Malasana position. Then I can underhook my ankle and slide my foot in line with my pelvis as my knee goes wide. So we're really using the arms here to help alleviate some work that might come up in the abdomen if we were to practice this without the help of our hands. Again, I bend that foot in by supporting underneath my thigh near my knee. And now I'm going to underhook the ankle, bringing the feet together in line with the center of the pelvis. Here we are in Baddha Konasana, bound angle pose. And as you press your feet together, notice how you can actually start to pull the toes away from each other. There's still a flexion happening in the foot, still some muscular activity. This is very helpful for the ankle, which is actually going to help support the knee. This will also assure that as you keep some flexion in the ankle, you get a little bit of flexion in the knee with the feet pressing together. Now our work and this external rotation that's happening in the hip, this opening that's happening in the hip, is actually in the hip socket itself. When the hips are tight, the other joints, such as the knee and the ankles, like to come in and substitute the effort. And so with that effort and support muscularly in those other joints, we can really get the hip socket to do this work here, this external rotation. As your feet are pressing towards each other, see if you can extend your knees towards the floor. And we're not pressing on the legs at all. We're trying to do this muscularly. We're really working from the hip joint and the hip socket itself. Now, while we're in this position, we're going to practice a pose called Little Mountain Pose or Parvatasana. Let's do this together. So you'll lace your fingers together, press the palms away so the arms are straight, and take the arms up and overhead. If you notice any pain or discomfort in the shoulders, you can always keep your wrists shoulder height. Whichever position you're in, notice what the shoulders are doing. Are they lifting up towards your ears? Do the collarbones in the front of your chest feel like they're caving in towards the chest? So take a nice deep inhale, lifting your chest up. See if you can spread from the collarbones towards the shoulders and squeeze the shoulder blades in towards the spine. So the whole shoulder joint actually starts to move onto the back of the body. Now the arms are straight here and we're really pressing through the heel of the palm. The palms are flat towards the ceiling, kind of like a tabletop would be. All the way from the floor to the hands. Think about your body as an entire unit. Noticing how that pressure of the feet can help you press your thighs towards the floor, knees towards the floor. And that downward effort can actually help you boost your chest, boost your side waists up towards the crown of the head, up towards the ceiling. As you exhale, soften any tension in the face, eyes, lips, or jaw. And then you'll bring the hands down. Notice which pinky is on that loose end, and we're going to switch the grasp of the fingers. Pressing the palms away and taking the arms up and overhead. As you tune into your body, you might feel a little bit more sensation in the limbs, the legs or the arms. But notice what's happening in the spine. Notice what's happening in the joints that are connecting your limbs towards the center of the body. And then you'll slowly bring your hands back down, unlace the fingers, and you can rest your hands on your thighs for a moment. Now we're going to come up to stand. So you can go ahead and bring your legs together. You can heel toe step the feet a little bit wider. We have a wide base here. We're actually going to come up to stand. So I like to come up by taking my legs forward. And for me, I just roll over to the side into this tabletop position. And then I can bring my feet underneath me and come up to stand. That'll help you accommodate baby in the belly. I'm going to shift my camera back. Now we're going to use our strap. I'm going to shift this prop out of the way here. So now we're going to use our strap, and we're just going to be in a standing posture. I have my feet a little bit wider than the hips, toes pointing in slightly, and I have a strap that I'm going to hold taut, meaning that I'm essentially pulling my hands away from each other while I'm gripping the strap to make it nice and tight. I'll demonstrate, and then we can do together. I'm going to start with my hands in front of me, and I'm still pulling on that strap. My arms are straight, and I'm going to take my hands all the way back and around. Full shoulder rotation here. If you notice that the elbows want to bend at any point, you can always just slide your hands away from each other a little bit more. Really try to straighten them by locking them out just so that they're stick straight here. And we'll take the arms forward and back. You can do this at your own pace. Really focusing on the breath here. Getting that shoulder joint warmed up. As you take a smooth, steady inhale, smooth, steady exhale. Let go of any tension that might be held in the face or the eyes. I like to harmonize this with my breath. So as we're inhaling, we're lifting upwards towards the ceiling. Exhaling, the arms move down. Inhaling, arms lift up towards the ceiling. Exhaling, arms move down. And then we can relax the arms, and we'll set our strap off to the side. That's a great one to get the shoulders onto the back. Really becomes a great practice when we start to move into postpartum. So the first 6 to 12 weeks, depending on your body's recovery after you've given labor, really just focused on restorative efforts. But it's pretty incredible to think we have so much focus on the hips for the birthing process. Yet once the baby is here, There's so much work happening on the front of the body, and the shoulders tend to round forward, whether we're breastfeeding, sitting on the couch a lot, nurturing baby, holding baby, bending over to pick things up and change baby. And so that arm rotation exercise is great to get a little bit more support in the upper back as that stage becomes fast approaching. Now we're going to use our wall just to practice a pose called Parivrita Trikonasana. This is, in Sanskrit, means revolved triangle pose. And normally, traditionally, is practiced as a forward bend and standing twist. However, we're going to stay upright and we're going to use the wall for us to get some length in the abdomen. Now you can watch for a moment and then go ahead and join in with me. I'm going to start by stepping 1 foot forward, and that foot's going to be the one that's closest towards the wall here. Then I'm going to bend my knee, front leg, and step my back foot back quite a bit here. My heel is lifted to start, and I'm close enough to the wall that I can lift my elbow towards the wall. So I stand up nice and straight. I'm going to rainbow and take my arm up and overhead, back behind me. And so now my chest is turning towards the wall. As you take a few breaths here, you can even take your outer arm against your low back or outer hand against the low back. So a couple key points: you're twisting towards that front leg, your chest is twisting towards the wall, and you should feel more of this happening in your shoulders as far as structurally goes, but you better believe that your uterus and those tendons and ligaments on the side that's away from the wall is going to feel quite the extension here. So keeping your inhale and exhale at the forefront of your mind. Let go of any gripping or tension that might be in the jaw, that might be in the face. We're just keeping our chin in line with the chest today. Really focusing on keeping the legs straight. As you lift your chest up towards the ceiling, lift through the crown of the head. Notice what areas in your body feel long, what areas feel short. Where do you feel that you can expand with your breath in comparison to where some areas might feel contracted or tight? And then to come out, we'll rainbow that arm back forward. I'm going to turn my toes towards the center of the room or away from the wall. And now we're going to switch sides. Now I'm pivoting on my opposite heel, turning on my toe ball mount on that back leg. And now I'm facing my front foot here. My back heel is lifted off the floor. Taking the hand that's closest to the wall, rainbowing it back behind us. The shoulder really stays at shoulder height, or maybe even a little bit higher. If you really feel some tension in the low back, some major stretching in the uterus, you can always keep that arm forward and just use the wall for support. Or maybe you're just taking the hand straight up towards the ceiling here to keep some lift in mind. So you decide what's best for your practice today. That back heel is still lifted. However, that leg is stick straight. And whichever hand is away from the wall, you're going to place the back of that hand against the back of your pelvis. That outer elbow reaches back behind you, chin in line with the chest. As you take a few deep breaths here, softening the eyes, softening the face. Notice if you can find some extension from that back foot all the way up to the chest, all the way up to the crown of the head. So you gently lengthen your inhale and exhale, soften any tension in the face, in the eyes, or jaw. And then we'll come back to center, bringing that hand forward, turning the toes away from the wall. And now you can heel toe step the feet together, bringing the feet back underneath you, underneath your hips. Now, normally we'd take some time to maybe do each side one or two more times, but for today and for time, we're gonna go ahead and move forward into a pose called Supta Baddha Konasana. This is a reclined bound angle pose. So we're gonna use our bolster and 2 blankets. I'm gonna show you guys this pose from the side so you can see getting in and out of it. I have a blanket on top of my bolster, which is gonna support my head. And then I'm gonna unfold my other blanket so it becomes quite long. This is essentially replacing a strap, which we might also use in this pose. But I like this version because it has some built-in support for the outer hips. Once your blanket is unfolded, we're gonna roll the long edge. I'm gonna show you some key points and then I'll walk you through how to come into this with me. So to start, I'm gonna have my bolster about 2 fists distance away from my pelvis. So I'm stacking my hands like this to create some space between my pelvis and the edge of the bolster. Then I'm gonna bring my feet together, knees wide. My rolled blanket is gonna come to the top of my feet. Then I'm gonna sweep the tail ends on the floor underneath my knees and tuck it underneath my hip here. Now, if you feel that that blanket is too short, you can always unfold the blanket once more, or see if you can bring your heels in a little bit closer to your pelvis. We really just need to pin it under the thighs enough so that we can lay back, and then we can actually pull those ends a little bit closer. So now once I have my feet bound, I have the ends of the rolled blanket underneath my hips, I'm gonna walk my hands behind me, and as I bend my elbows, I can recline down. You'll feel the bolster is primarily supporting the rib cage here in this posture. You can even add a little bit more fold and support underneath the head. So the chin comes in towards the chest here, back of the neck is long. So like I mentioned, you can grab those ends of the blanket, pull the feet in a little bit closer. And now I'm actually lifting my hips up. I'm not sure if you can see that, but as I press my feet down towards the floor, lifting my hips up, and I'm gonna tuck those tail ends of the blanket right underneath my hips, helping draw that outer hip into the hip joint here, and arms come out to the side. So if you haven't jumped into this pose already, I'll just give you some instructions for coming into it. I'll go ahead and do with. So feet are together, knees wide, bolster is about 2 fists away from the pelvis. I place the blanket on the tops of my feet, sweep the ends underneath my knees and tuck them under my hips. Taking the hands behind me and alongside the bolster, I can lower myself down, fold the blanket up underneath my head so that the neck and the head feel nice and supported here. You can pull that edge of the blanket all the way to the tops of the shoulders, but the shoulders are free from support. You'll grab those tail ends of the blanket. You can pull your feet a little bit closer to you. And as you press your feet into the floor, lift your hips up, tuck your tailbone for a moment, and then you can wedge those tail ends of the blanket underneath your hip socket. And resting the hips back down. And the arms will come out to the side. Usually we have the arms 1.5 feet or more away from the hips. And what you really want to look for is that as you breathe, you can feel some extension in the sides of the rib cage, almost as if you can breathe into the armpit. There should be space there. And as you gently lengthen your inhale and exhale, tune into your body, tune into your breath. And as you breathe in and out through the nose, see if you can let go of any tension or effort with every exhale. And as we move into these more restful and restorative poses, we can click into becoming an observer and more of a witness of our body and our mind. As that physical activity diminishes, sometimes the mental activity can become a little bit more noticeable and a little bit less focused, which is natural. You might notice thoughts coming in and out of the mind, noticing when the mind wanders. And as you notice that, just gently bring your focus back to your body, back to your breath. That experience of retraining the mind on what to focus on is some brain training in itself. This is where focusing on the rhythm of the breath can be helpful. And some even find the benefit of focusing on mantras. So, mantras might be a word or a statement that brings a sense of being uplifted, a sense of grounding. So, usually they're statements of gratitude or appreciation that really start to boost the mood when repeated over and over again. I'll share some mantras with you. I'm so grateful for everything my body has done and will do. I'm so grateful for everything that my body has done and will do. I take time to tune into my body. I take time to tune into my body. I trust myself and I trust my body. I trust myself and I trust my body. I deeply and completely love and accept myself. I deeply and completely love and accept myself. Just taking a few more breaths. And continue to repeat any mantra that resonates most with you. Maybe it's one that you come up with on your own. It really nourishes you in a personal way. Repeating this mantra as you gently lengthen your inhale and exhale. Observe your body as an entire unit, bringing your attention towards the skin. You're welcome to stay in this pose a little bit longer if you'd like, or if you're ready to come out and transition into your day, you'll bring your legs together, knees together. Take your right arm up and overhead, and you'll roll off to your side, coming off the props and onto the floor. And as you take a few breaths here, try to bring that steadiness, bringing your mantra with you as you move into action. Eyes soft, maybe even keeping the eyes closed here. Whenever you're ready, you can start to press yourself up, bringing the hands underneath you to come up to sit. I really appreciate you taking the time to nourish your body today so that you can better nourish your baby. And I appreciate this opportunity to practice with you. Namaste. Thank you so much for joining me. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out in the comments or you can directly message me. Otherwise, I hope you have a great day and that your journey into motherhood is one that you can cherish and remember forever.